coming up in this episode.
And culture as well. It's not just, I think often people think culture is just, is it a happy place to work? Culture means way more than that, right? It's like, do you take risks as a company? Do you give people opportunities? Do you give them autonomy to work in the way they want to work? Do you give them chances? Is there the ability for them to, get promoted at, a faster rate than other companies? So I think this culture term can be a bit fluffy.
I don't think that in B2B SaaS, your direct competitors are in the same industry as you. It's everyone in B2B SaaS now is your direct competitor, because everyone's vying for the same portion of the budget, the overall company budget. So, whether you're in wellness or you're in sales enablement or whatever it is you're doing, you're in competition with one another for that money these days, because of everyone's, being very, very lean in the way that they operate.
We've had situations with our portfolio companies where the founders are like, I really want to build an app. I really want to build this. I want to build that. And we're like, well, why? We are challenging them to say, why do you want to do that? Oh, because of this. Or, I don't want to launch because I want to build these 3 or 4 features first. Why? Whereas a typical agency model would just be build the features because, they're going to get paid for it.
The Founders Unplugged podcast, hosted by Greg Mccallum. Raw, uncensored conversations with startup founders.
First time. So look, it's great to get you on. I've been trying to get you on for a while now. So thanks for jumping on. So, but before we get into it, I'll kind of talk about just very briefly the only bit of structure in this entire shit show of a show that we've got going on today, because it is pretty, unscripted. It's just a chat kind of thing. But there is one bit I like to do up front, which is just ask my guests if they would be so kind to just introduce themselves, a bit about what they do, and then I have some questions for you that I'd like to delve in a bit more about you and what you do. And while you're talking, I might share my screen, your profile, your website, and stuff like that, if that's okay with you. So go ahead.
Of course. Okay, so I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Founder and Lightning. So we are a venture studio and we partner with founders to build out their tech companies. So we started about 8 years ago, and we've always been predominantly focused on supporting non-technical founders who don't code, however you kind of want to call it. Because essentially my background before then, I took over my family business when I was pretty young, dropped out of university at the age of 19 to take over my family business, which was a analog, aka offline company that sold musical instruments. So I was a musical instrument retailer. It supplied to councils around the country. It had a shop, it had a music school, and I changed the name and digitized it. And I am a founder who doesn't code. So I went through all the pains and struggles of doing that. Freelancers, agencies, I looked at accelerators, and essentially none of them were great for me. None of them particularly worked particularly well. I went through 3 or 4, 2 or 3 agencies, 1 or 2 freelancers, got let down a lot of time. But throughout that process, as a founder who doesn't code, I learned how to build a product, how to take something to market, kind of made all the mistakes that you can make, which was kind of sucked at the time, but now in looking back, it's allowed me to start this business. So people in my network were coming up to me and saying, look, you've just digitized that business, perhaps you could help me digitize mine. And that's really how Founder and Lightning was born. So from the start, we were never set up to be an agency. We always wanted to be a proper partner, and I'm sure a lot of people say spiel like that, but we genuinely do. And the way we do that is that we have equity in pretty much every single founder that we work with. It's very rare that we don't. And the business model before, until about a year ago, was that we would discount our fees in return for equity. So typically we discount our fees by 15, 20%, and that converts into some equity. So we did that 30 odd times over the first seven years of the business. And then about a year ago, we pivoted the model. So we've now raised a fund, and we're raising another fund at the moment, so that we can actually directly invest into the companies that we work with, rather than just purely on the discounted of fees model.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. And it's thank you for mentioning what you did there about about your parents' business, because I remember seeing some posts about that, and I was going to ask about, because you did mention on a few occasions that you digitized the business and very early on in your career. So tell me a bit more about that, because I'm interested in that, because of I had my little foray into the music industry early on in my career too, albeit not particularly successfully. But so yeah, tell me a bit more about that. What do you mean by you digitize the business exactly? Because of I think that we could just think, okay, well, that's bringing it up to sort of modern day requirements. Building a website, this sort of that and the other. What was it that you really needed
we
to build?
had I mean, we actually, in hindsight, this was a mistake. We built everything custom.
And this is going back about 8 years ago, you were saying?
No, this is 12, 13 years ago.
Right, okay.
When I first started doing it, built everything from scratch, maybe even longer, maybe 15 years ago. Everything from scratch. We had a logistics platform, a musical instrument rental platform, because we were helping some councils to sort of digitize their rental part of their business as well. So if you're a kid at a council and you get given, or you have to pay for a musical instrument, for some councils we were running that program for them. So built that from scratch, built the logistics platform from scratch, built the e-commerce platform from scratch. In hindsight, huge mistake, took too long. There was probably loads of other things on the market that we could have used and just tweaked for our own. So that really good learning back then. Even now, obviously, if you're looking to build a startup, the odds that you need to immediately start coding are really low, and you might be able to build something really small and scrappy just to prove concept through no code or low code. So good learning. So yeah, I kind of look back at that period and made a ton of mistakes and load of things I wished I did differently. But if I wouldn't have gone through that period and gone through that process, I wouldn't have just simply learned the stuff that I learned. And it's not just about building products, it's how to run cash flow, how to work with suppliers, how to do customer service, how to do sales calls, it's all those things. So it's probably
the founder skill set, right? The
founder skill set,
well-rounded, diverse set of skills that you need to manage all of that.
Yeah, I think it's just a really stressful way of doing a version of an MBA.
Right. Yeah.
probably as expensive or more expensive as well than doing an MBA. It was a tough few years in a particularly difficult industry as well. That industry is extremely low margin. And actually it's like any retailer, right? What is your uniqueness? You're selling somebody else's. You're ultimately selling somebody else's goods, and that's why we tried to diversify into doing things like running the rental departments for councils, or we actually ended up bringing our own brand of saxophone in, which we got from China, and that was actually pretty successful, and that was a really interesting experience to go through, because the margin, obviously, rather than being, the margins were terrible in the industry, gross margin, and this is a long time ago, so this is what I remember it being, was 15% or 20% tops. Really low gross margin, sometimes 10% on some of the big brands, and then suddenly you go to 70, 80, 90% of bringing your own thing in. So a few learnings. If I was to do it again, I would double down and focus on that, because that part was really good, but we needed the rest of the business, because we got grown the rest of the business quite big. That wasn't enough to prop up the rest. But I would have toned down the retail side, the online retail side, which is the bit that we grew. I think we got it, we got it up with about 10, 15, 20 staff, something like that, a couple of £1 million in turnover. But to compete with anyone in that industry, you had to be doing 8 to 10 million in turnover, and it was just too difficult. But I was glad to get out of that industry, and glad that the learnings that I took from that industry I could take into what I'm doing now, which is essentially, like I say, a similar thing. It's building products with founders, and taking those exact same learnings. So the reason startups fail or product launches fail is fundamentally for the same reason over and over again, right? It's that the problem the founder thinks they're solving doesn't exist, or it's a nice to have. It's a vitamin, not a painkiller. The timing is wrong. They're too early, or too late. I think it's probably often more too early rather than too late. Wrong team, so they've got the wrong people building their platform, or they don't have the skill sets to do it, or they run out of cash. So those fundamental, key tenets of strands, reasons why product launches and startups consistently fail, that's what we wanted to mitigate. So we wanted to, be a venture studio that was able to mitigate risk for us, of course, because we're shareholders, for the founders, of course, because too many startups fail, and that's bad for the UK economy, and that's bad for founders, and also for investors. We want to mitigate the risk because we're trying to build a model where investing into startups doesn't have to be quite as risky. We're trying to be, a little bit different to a typical VC, where they're maybe looking for moonshots to prop up the rest of their portfolio. We're looking more to build a bunch of sustainable companies that all have the potential to exit for tens of millions rather than hundreds of millions. If some of them exit for hundreds of millions, we're certainly not going to complain or push back on that. But our model isn't reliant on that. We've built with over 40 companies now. We will do 10 a year. We'll do another 10 next year. We'll do another 10 year after that, another 10 after that. So in 5 years' time, we'll maybe have 100. I've got no interest in having a 100 portfolio companies, 90 of them failing and 10 of them doing great. That just won't be a nice experience for us, because we work so closely with these founders that that's just not a very nice experience. We are ingrained in their business. We are more than just going to a board meeting every 3 months. We're working with them every single day. So I think it makes good economic sense that it's slightly different to a typical VC model, but also it's just I want it to be fun, and for it to be fun, I want less of them to fail.
Yeah, and not having the stress that goes with that, I suppose, is also
exactly
keeping it fun as well. So you mentioned there that it's you're working with them every day. So what does that look like, practically speaking? Let's maybe start sort of at the beginning of a journey of someone working with you. I assume that, you of course have to select them, presumably before, vet them, and there's a process there, just like with any other fund, I would imagine. But then let's say you decide to work with them. What's then the process? What's the roadmap that you're laying out across the team and across their team?
So we have a very, very specific thesis that that we work with. So we will really only, unless there's a very rare case, work with one of two use cases. This is for F&L Capital, which is where we invest. We still do have our old model where we discount our fees in return for equity, but we do that very rarely. I think we have only done that twice this year so far.
Right.
It'll have to be a founder that we really love, but isn't in quite the right thesis fit for our F&L Capital, but we still really want to work with them. So I'll just talk mainly about F&L Capital, because I think that's the most useful for this conversation, and it's what we do the most of. So one of two things: either the founder has a very scrappy MVP that is doing a little bit of revenue that they now want to industrialize, they want to scale. So it could be that they've built something on no code. It could be that they've got spreadsheets. It could be that they've used an agency and they've built something scrappy, and now the scale is starting to be a problem. And they don't have to be doing tons and tons of revenue. We prefer if they're doing north of 10k a month, but we have done stuff a little bit less than that. But we just really want to show that and prove that they've got something. We're not investing at the stage where it's ideation. There might not be a full product market fit yet. We can help them get there. But they've got something there. So it's either that, or the second thing is that we're digitizing offline companies. So a company that has got revenue, we want them to have proper product market fit at this point, but this is product market fit in an analog sense rather than a tech sense. So it could be that they're still going to be using some kind of platform. They might be using spreadsheets, they might be using WordPress, but they've got what we call a proper business there. If they didn't build the tech, they could still build that business to a nice exit. What we're coming in really with the tech is an additive. It's something that's on top. So an example of that is a company that we invested into about 6 months ago called Cake Drop. They are perishable goods for corporates. So they've actually owned their own bakery, and they provide customized cakes to corporates. So they did that with WordPress, they did that with spreadsheets, and we're building technology to turn them into a subscription business. But there's a proper business under there. So that's kind of the two different angles that we like to go down. And then in terms of the founder fit, they need to be either a domain expert, or they've been doing it for long enough so that they're now a domain expert.
Right.
And typically they are founders that don't code, because we are the CTO and the CPO. We have done some stuff recently with founders that do have a couple of developers that they're working with, and I'll explain why in a sec. They need to be very commercial. They need to be able to sell. And really, we're really looking for, how much progress have they made in the time period from which they started? Are they humble? Will they listen? But they're also confident, and that's a real balance for us, because we want confident founders that can sell. But ultimately, we've been doing this for almost a decade. We kind of know how to do the product and the tech bit. We're looking for founders that are going to listen and take guidance as well. So that's a tough balance to find. But so that's the thesis of the type of companies we're looking for, which we think is a little bit different to what's out there, and the type of founders as well. In terms of the process, once they come into our pipeline, we can usually very quickly say whether they're going to go through to the next step. We send them a bunch of questions. Again, if they go past the next step after that, we then invite them in for a workshop. If both sides want to work with each other after that, then we go into what we call a discovery, which is typically a 2 to 3 week period. And off the back of that, we'll make the investment decision. So that 2 to 3 week period is time for our product management team to spend time with the founder, our tech team, our VC team. We're doing market research. We're talking to their customers. We are working out with the founder what it is that we'll build together, so that we're completely aligned. So it's really quite in-depth DD, I think. Definitely more DD than a typical angel would do. And maybe not less in-depth or more in-depth than a VC, but maybe slightly different, because we're very much focused on the product, and the customers. And then if we start working with each other, then that's it. We invest and we start working with each other. And typically the money that we put in will get the founders roughly 6 months worth of work with the venture studio team. And we do have the ability to invest more for working capital as well, not just recycle back into our venture studio team, into our venture studio. And then we have the ability to follow on invest after 6 months as well for ones that are doing sort of gaining the traction that we want them to have.
That's interesting, because there's a couple of times when you were explaining that you mentioned about how important it is for the founder to have a sort of a commercial track record, right? To understand sales and all that. That's interesting. That's such a. I mean, it kind of makes sense that would be such an important part of it. You're bringing the tech side of things to the table, so they need to at least bring that. That's and as a commercial advisor, that's something that I suppose I'm trying to help the opposite side off, which is people who have neither, or maybe have the technological side but don't have the commercial side, which is there's a lot of too, right?
Yeah, of course.
Do you find that that there are many founders out there that match that profile? Because it seems to me quite difficult at the moment, at least, for the vast majority of the founders I speak to really feel like they're confident in the sort of commercial side of things, regardless of what other experience they have. That seems to be the one they struggle with the most. But it might just be my current vantage point. Clearly I'm biased.
I guess we've done over 40. I think only one of those founders is a trained salesperson that came from a sales back. Actually, that's not true. Two or three tops. Yeah, literally have done.
It's going to be mostly from doing it, right? That's where the experience is going to come.
I think there's things that you can pick up on, right? How do they sell themselves in the DD process? How do they explain their proposition?
Right.
If they're a domain experts, you don't need to sell. You just be passionate about the domain, and then naturally it's almost better to not be a trained commercial person, because then you're not sleazy. Right?
And you don't have any bad habits from it.
So I think we're looking for natural salespeople, not necessarily trained salespeople. And
good communicators. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. An excellent founder is someone who's just an excellent communicator, in my view. And that's a natural salesperson, because that's 90% of what sales is, in a way, in my view. So
and like I say, if they're a domain expert, they know their industry inside out, then they shouldn't really necessarily have to sell. It's why it's a big reason why we focus on B2B as well. So our fund never invests into B2C. We believe, of course, there are amazing B2C businesses that can be built. it's not our massive area of expertise. We can build the tech for it, no problem. And we do it on the other business model that I spoke about before, where we discount our fees in return for equity. We still do that sometimes. But for me, what's great about B2B businesses is that as the founder, you can sell. You're not reliant on PPC. You're not reliant on risky marketing. You can ultimately your overhead base is you, and you can
working with a dodgy marketing agency from Fiverr or like
ultimately,
because you're still you don't have to encounter some of the similar issues as trying to build something by hiring freelancers and not knowing what works, what doesn't, people's track records. You're kind of in the same boat then.
Exactly. But no, I think there are a lot of founders out there that are natural salespeople, and maybe they don't realize it. Obviously we're bringing the tech and the product bit, right? So if they can't do the sales bit, then
probably shouldn't be a founder.
And it's not to say that they can't. It's not to say they can't get better or improve. And there's as you say, people like yourself. There's tons of people out there that can help you. But you have to be a bit of a natural. You don't have to be the polished article to work with us. We're looking past that. But you got to show that you can naturally sell and communicate, as you say, and because that goes all the way down. It's not just to your customers, it's to your investors, it's to us, it's to your team. If you're going to scale a company to tens of millions, you're going to have to be able to employ, a minimum probably of 30 people, right? So how are you going to be able to get them behind a vision and get them all working in the right direction? As you say, it all comes down to communication.
That's the key word, isn't it? Vision. It's like, being able to communicate the vision to people properly in a way which is succinct and gets people excited, and just like hopefully somewhere close to as passionate as they are as a founder, right? That's the goal, isn't it? So tell me a bit more about this other model. So that you said this is the model that you started on originally then. So offering a discount for your services in return for equity. So is that how you actually founded Founder and Lightning originally on that
Correct.
basis, was it?
Yeah, correct. So never wanted to have an agency. Never wanted to be an agency where you just do work,
like a traditional software house.
Software house. We do a bit with corporates on that side, and that is something that we will scale up over time. But it wasn't why we started the business. It's something that we've grown into, and actually we enjoy doing. But there's no point doing that with a startup. If you're going to do that, it needs to be with a corporate who, frankly, can pay you fees that make it worthwhile. A startup, unless you're bought in on the equity side, I don't know why an agency would ever work with one, because it's the incentives are completely misaligned. The agency just needs to make money and profit, and the startup founder needs to build a successful business. And in my view, that's not aligned unless the studio business has some kind of equity in it, because it's just natural human instinct that the studio is going to want to build more features, keep things going longer than maybe it should do, not launch too quickly, wait for perfect, all the reasons why I spoke about at the start of this call was why startups fail. I don't think that the incentives are aligned in the typical agency model to set that relationship up for success. We've had situations with our portfolio companies where the founders are like, I really want to build an app, I really want to build this, I want to build that. And we're like, well, why? We are challenging them to say, why do you want to do that? Oh, because of this. Or, I don't want to launch because I want to build these 3 or 4 features first. Why? Whereas a typical agency model would just be build the features because, they're going to get paid for it. So it's just natural human instinct. So we never wanted to start up as a traditional agency. It was always, okay, we'll do this, but we want to take a bit of equity. And, some of those ones are now 7-8 years ago, and they're now getting to the point where they've raised Series A funding. Some of them at sort of 15-20 million valuation. Hopefully they're on an exit trajectory now over the next 2 or 3 years. Some of them we're still working with. They start to bring some of it in-house. They might have the product team in-house. They might have a few developers in-house, and they're still using a bit of our services as well. But we're 100+ people now in our company, so we are a team of product managers, designers, engineers, and then our strategic leadership team. So we can help portfolio companies throughout that whole journey. So at the early stage, but then also help them scale and help them kind of de-risk it by taking certain things in-house over time. I think that's what makes us different to that typical agency model.
Yeah, and it's a great model, but and it's very interesting what you said there as well about how, essentially with the traditional software or a house/agency model, that there's not really the incentives there on either party to sort of mitigate those risks
Yeah.
associated with the early stage. It's interesting to say because I've worked with some founders in the past. There are very few of them out there, but I've worked with a couple who have just had the money and have just said, I want to go out, find it, I've got this idea, I want to build this thing, and they've built it. And I've not seen a single one of those succeed as a result, because they've built without the constraints that you to really, be frugal and those boundaries that really force you to be very picky with what it is that you decide to build. Those constraints are very useful. Because when you've only got a very small budget to play with, you have to think, well, we can only build a product with very set amount of features. I need to find out which features do my users want, right? Whereas if you've got all the money in the world, you keep building, you keep adding features, and then it's kind of death.
It happens far too often.
Yeah.
Again, going back to the start of the call, reasons why startups fail, problem with their founder thinks, they're solving doesn't exist.
Right.
As you say, if you just keep building, it hasn't got the traction it's got. It's because it doesn't have enough features. It's because it needs to do this. Okay, who have you validated this with? Oh, nobody. It's just my gut instinct. And as a founder, you're going to find an agency that's just going to keep taking money off you.
Yeah,
you're gonna.
That's exactly what happened. They're more than happy. It's more hours.
Yeah. They're gonna keep doing it. So I often give advice to founders and say, if you are talking to a few different agencies or studios or whatever option you go from, don't dismiss the one that is challenging you. It doesn't mean that they don't respect you or believe in the vision. They are trying to do the right thing. I've seen it so often where a founder will just go with the agency that just says yes to everything, strokes their ego, and then 250 grand down the line, when they've got a big bloated product that nobody's using, they wish that they'd gone with the agency right at the start that said, we need to do a 4-week or 6-week discovery to make sure your users actually want this.
And probably doesn't work very well as well, which is the surprising thing for a lot of founders. Once they spend that much money and then they realize they have a product that doesn't work, and why is it I spend that much money doesn't work? Because if you're paying them to say yes to everything, so they're not going to say, if you do this, it's going to break this. They're not interested in that. It's just they will build what you ask.
Yeah, and there's probably been multiple pivots before it's even got to market to justify whether it should be pivoted or not. So you end up with this big mishmash product that doesn't really have a clear value proposition. I see founders, they don't think about the go-to-market enough very regularly. So they are kind of just still think they'll build it and it's going to, they will come rather than, and a massive thing that I don't see enough founders do is try to build an offline version of their business first. And this is, I think, the number one hack, especially in this environment, where money is really hard to get, especially if you don't have any traction. If you can build an offline version of what you're trying to build first and get some revenue, then you are so much further ahead than other people who, that are trying the same thing. So, if you're a domain expert and you're building something in your industry, can you do a consulting version of what you're doing? Is there a spreadsheet version of what you can do for corporates?
Like almost a service-led version.
Service-led version.
Right, yeah.
If you're building something that is a marketplace, a professional services marketplace, can you just be a consultancy or a recruitment agency that's in that niche, and then you're building up the two-sided marketplace, so when you come to build the tech, you've got something that you're actually working from. Or can you do a combination of that and a little bit of no code, so that at least you're using a little bit of tech, but it's not the entire business. The days of just spending £250,000 on a product, launching it and expecting it to work, unless you are, unless you've got such a big vision and deep enough pockets to pull it off, then I don't. But I think they're the exception rather than the.
There might be another exception, which is an extremely innovative,
correct,
ambitious, disruptive concept that probably is born out of a founder having very, very specific expertise or qualifications and insight.
And we've got a couple of those. We've got one particularly, which I can't talk about yet because it hasn't launched, but where he's going big, he's going huge.
Yeah. And there are some that you just have to do that
that you can't do that. You can't do that one on the cheap, right. and you can't do that one in 2 months. So
but most people's businesses don't.
Most businesses don't. Most businesses, most people shouldn't do that. Most people don't have the experience to do that, and most people should just try and get going in the smallest possible way and just get $5,000 a month of revenue coming in, showing that because what that will do, that offline version, that professional services version, that is show, okay, these are actually where their pain points are. I'm providing this service. They want it. If I went and built a bit of tech now to make that even smoother or more efficient, they would buy it. And I think that's the number one hack that founders should be doing in the next year or two, when getting pre-seed rounds with no early stage traction is just becoming almost impossible. And friends and family.
I agree with you 100%. And I suppose, I think the way I've been putting it in the past has been slightly different, but I might start borrowing some of what you've said there to explain it, which is that there needs to be more of a focus on building a community around your concept first, which is something that I've been banging that drum for a while, ever since, really my foray into the gaming industry a little bit, actually. I don't know if you game much or you know much about the gaming industry, but there's been a sort of a way of doing things in the gaming industry for a long time now, where you do the alpha, you do the beta, you build a community, you get feedback. That's always been a part of the process, and it really become a bit more standard in SaaS in recent years. That's an example. Obviously that's a bit further along and it's purely tech, so you can't do the offline version of that. It's not like you can get Fortnite in real life and then we'll build a game version of it.
You'd probably get arrested if you did that.
Yeah, probably, but it's that taking it even a further step back, like you said, and actually going, well, what can be a service-led version of this product be, is interesting. Although saying that, I've also spoke to a lot of people, because I do a lot of pro bono work, right, for early stage, ideation stage founders, maybe, especially, who just want some tips. So how do I even get started on this idea? What's my first steps? All of that. And I'll be completely honest, and I don't mind saying this for people listening, a lot of them are just terrible ideas, right? A lot of them are just terrible ideas. And the vast majority of them, in the camp of being terrible ideas, of which there's quite a lot, are usually people in the realm of consulting or workshop providers and things like that, who usually now are saying, I want an AI to do X, right? Do my job for me or whatever. And I'm like, that's not what people want. People want you. There are ways of digitizing it, I think, like you said, but it needs to be a bit more innovative than that.
I mean, the reason why people don't want to build a community first is because it's hard.
Yeah, it takes time.
Simple as that. It's hard and it takes time, and you have to put yourself out there. So I don't know what you call it, but there is a trait I find in founders that they don't want to put themselves out there because they're worried that if they do, they will fail. And that's why often they'll take months and months and months to launch something and add a load of features, because it's because of this, we need one more. And it's the same with the community, right? You get a community together and you start pitching your ideas, and you don't get the reaction that you want, that you kind of feel like you fail. So I get it, it's human nature, but unfortunately,
also, a lot of founders don't even know where to start building a community. They're just like, what does that even mean? How do you even start? That's a daunting thing, because as a term, or it's quite a broad one to say. And I think a lot of people automatically think of things like Slack or Discord channels, or newsletters, and actually no, it's something other than that. It's just going out and asking people, you want this thing? Yes, okay, cool.
There's Slack, Discord, and stuff like that, and offline events and stuff, that it can get to that. But go and talk to 20 people and have 20 people, to start with. But there's that lovely cliche at the moment that the community is the last big marketing tactic left. That you just don't have to chuck loads of money into. So I think it's definitely something that founders should consider. But like I say, the reason I don't do it is because it's hard.
Yeah, a great example of someone who's done it right, there's been a couple recently that I spoke to, but one that's just become a client of mine, she is purely led by events. That's her entire business. So great example of what you're saying as well, which is it's an event-led business model, bringing together a very specific group of people who have a very specific interest, and then she has plans to digitize that moving forward. I may very well put you in touch with her in the near future when she's at that point, in fact. And it's just been refreshing to hear her approach on that, of understanding, like, I had this vision, but I knew I needed to strip it right back and just focus on one event at a time, making the events the best that they could be, making them highly valuable. And then she built like an online community through WhatsApp, and then she upgraded that to Slack, and it was like, that's how you do it.
That's how you should do it these days.
Foot in front of the other. This was
mean,
over a period of only a couple of years. So actually, when you sit back and think about it, founders are, like you said, impatient and they want it to happen now. But actually, it doesn't take that long when you.
I think they think, oh, I'm building a tech company, the first thing I should go to is tech. But we basically, we do invest in some pure tech companies, of course we do, but the majority of what we do are tech enabled. They are proper businesses enabled by tech in a very, very tight niche. You spoke about that niche before, so in my mind, if you can have a proper business that you're enabling with tech, and then it's in a very tight niche, then that's where you're going to get those businesses that can very, not easily, it's really difficult, have the ability to sell for tens of millions. And as long as an investor, we're getting in at the right valuation and the dilution works for the founders over time, they can be very successful businesses. They might not be venture backed by some of the bigger VCs, but we don't think that's a terrible thing.
No, absolutely
I think focus on making a proper business first, because in this funding environment, it's way easier to do that than the alternative.
100%, and that's essentially what traction is. What we've just been talking about there, to a degree, that's part of traction, and then of course there comes revenue, but that's very much a fundamental part of it. And it's refreshing to hear you say that that's what you're looking for, and you're going after the tens of millions rather than the hundreds of millions or the billions, right? Which is usually the remit for some of these larger VC firms that we see. They don't want to have a niche product market fit. They want to have a global product market fit. So that's really interesting.
Well, look,
and refreshing to you say that.
We need my view is we need both, right? I'm not saying that they're obviously extremely smart and successful, some of these VCs, and they've invested in unicorns, and that's great. And the economy needs them as well, right? We need
even a broken clock is right twice a day, though.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's some fantastic ones, and for the right type of founder, that's what they want to do. I just think it's important to highlight that there is an alternative route, that you don't have to go down that route if that's not what you want to do. And there's ways of both investors and founders making really good returns, and you don't have to sell for 200, 300, 400. You can sell a business for 50, 60 million, and everyone can do really well out of it. And if you look, I don't have the exact numbers to hand, but the vast majority of exits are in the tens of millions, so the ones you hear about are the much bigger ones, but the vast majority are in the tens of millions, probably below 50. So why not encourage those and stimulate those?
Yeah, 100%. And have any of your portfolio companies exited since you've
no, so we're 7-8 years in. Vast majority of ours have come really in the last 5 years. So the first 2 or 3 years we did a few which are now at Series A. We've got a handful at Series A, raised money at substantial valuation. They're probably looking like they'll exit in the next sort of couple of years. So it just shows you that's the life cycle, right? The life cycle the life cycle is 7 to 10 years. So you have to be in it for the long game.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's we'll have to check back in a couple of years then to see what's going on there. So you mentioned no code earlier, which is another sort of hot button thing, along with kind of talking about the community and the traction that's needed, especially like you said, with the change in the landscape. Everyone's kind of thinking on their feet, as it were, as to how to go about launching. No code is another one of those things that's on everyone's lips at the moment, and you mentioned that as something that you kind of embrace. So what is it? Does it have any place within the studio itself, or in terms of the what you help with building, or you strictly sticking? Talk more on that.
Because we're investing at the still very early stage, but slightly later stage, where founders have got a little bit of traction. if we are working with founders that have used no code, it's for us to basically rebuild it and turn it into something special. So we want to invest at the point where a founder has used no code to get them to a certain point, and now they're having scale challenges with what they've got.
So you wouldn't look to continuously develop on an existing no-code platform with no code. You would look to ideally replace that with something a bit more robust.
Yeah, because ultimately we want to build a company where the value, the IP value is obviously in the technology stack. And some people probably will totally disagree with me on this, but I don't think it's necessarily been proven yet either way, because it's all relatively new. But I'm not sure whether you can sell your business if it's underwritten by Bubble, as pure self-owned IP, because it's not at the end of the day, right? Really good. I mean, if you want to build a lifestyle business where you never want to sell, if you just want to bootstrap something and you want to keep it for 10 years and make profit, then you don't need to rebuild that tech stack, right? But I think there is going to be a negative valuation arbitrage if you come to exit and you're in a no-code stack. But like I said, people might disagree with me on that, but absolutely fantastic to get going, proof concept. Because we're investing at a slightly later stage, we're kind of letting other people do the early stage stuff. I mean, there's Bubble experts. There's also a couple of companies that have started to build their own sort of very scrappy, almost stuff that is, written in JavaScript, where it's like very, very cheap to get going. Yeah, again, it will get you to a certain point, and then you'll probably need to rebuild it. But you can get going for 10 grand. Just 5 years ago, that just wasn't a possibility. So I think in some respects it's brilliant, because it's opening up a much wider pool of founders to get going. But I still think founders need to spend time validating their concept and making sure they're building the right thing, right? Because it's almost so easy to get going now that you think, I may as well just chuck 10 grand into this and give it a go. Whereas,
and there's and more to the point, I think there's an overabundance of shit ideas that are being built now as well, just to be brutally honest. Like I said earlier, and that's not to say there aren't some amazing ones now as a result of that democratization of being able to go to market quicker. But there is also an overabundance of shit that now needs to be sifted through in order to find that great stuff, because everyone's able to do it now. Everyone and their mum seems to have a startup these days.
I think it's also a massive opportunity for people to get going. Of course it is, like I just said, but it's also a massive risk in the enterprise SaaS world, because if you are a big corporate, you could just build a version of what you're buying in terms of a SaaS solution, go and get 2, 3, 4 smart no coders and just start internally automating your processes, your operation. And you might in the future be able to take what you're currently paying 24 separate SaaS solutions and just stitch together your own version of it. So I'm not saying that is something that is like imminently going to happen, but I could see a scenario where in the future, a big corporate, you can go and use 5 or 6 different platforms, stitch them all together, and do a version of stuff that you're currently paying tens of thousands of pounds a year for on SaaS products.
Yeah, and I think that's a really valid point, and one that I've spoke to a couple of other people on the show about before, which is that there's an oversaturation of SaaS, B2B SaaS especially, which is applying a lot of pressure on businesses from a financial perspective. Their tech stack is growing in expense every month, and that's why we heard, especially during COVID, and then the sort of recovery period after COVID, a lot of businesses were struggling, B2B SaaS, because a lot of their budgets within each company were being cut, and they'd have to prioritize the tools within their tech stack. And then of course, some were just seen as not as priority as others. And that's why now, sorry, go ahead.
As I say, that's why FNL Capital, we're looking, if we can, to invest into proper businesses and digitize them.
Right.
We are doing,
because it's about de-risking it. That's an element of de-risking.
Well, I mean, they're a proper business already. They're not a B2B SaaS product that needs enterprise customers. Right. They are a proper business. I mean, we do B2B SaaS as well, but we're very select on the reasons. But there is a massive oversaturation, as you say. Yeah. There are lots of people competing for. I don't know whether it's shrinking. The data says whether it's shrinking, but it seems to be certainly not growing as fast.
Well, it's because everyone's going for each other. right? That's the irony in it. It's a Shark Tank, with no food but just other sharks. So it's cannibalizing.
Yeah, I mean, look, we get I'm going to say 2 or 3 applications a week for wellness platforms.
If you are enjoying this episode and want to support the show, please like and subscribe with notifications turned on.
There just isn't going to be enough space for them. So, if we were to invest in that space, it would be into a company that has already proven a version of what they're doing offline, and then they're just digitizing it, rather than yet another tech platform in the wellness space. Obviously that's a massively growing industry, but there can't be enough space for the amount of people that are trying to do the same thing. There just can't be big enough budgets for it.
And like I mentioned, I think the important thing to think about with this is that I don't think that in B2B SaaS your direct competitors are in the same industry as you. It's everyone in B2B SaaS now is your direct competitor, because everyone's vying for the same portion of the budget, the overall company budget. So whether you're in wellness or you're in sales enablement or whatever it is you're doing, you're in competition with one another for that money these days, because of everyone's being very, very lean in the way that they operate. So but I hadn't thought about what you mentioned there about before, which has given me food for thought now, which is really interesting, about this idea of larger enterprises just building their own smaller solutions for a lot of these. Because let's face it, a lot of these B2B solutions are quite not huge. Like they are solving 1, maybe 2 smaller problems overall in a company. And if they already have a team of developers, as most of these companies are, software companies themselves, they might just say, look, solve this problem for us. And that way it's more bespoke, more, for their needs. And problem solved internally without ongoing costs.
I think it's a massive problem that's coming in the next few years. And actually, a really good business model is to go and consult on building those tools for big corporates. It's like basically internal tools to automate ops, automate sales processes, automate marketing, automate recruitment, all that kind of stuff. Which
already exists, right? That's already existed for some time, these kinds of internal teams. But I guess what you're saying is now that they could go a step further and just start automating some of the tools that are in their tech stack and make the need for that subscription completely redundant. And I suppose that's also the risk of the recurring revenue model, which is that while it's great for business overall, the risk is you're constantly tapping away at someone's revenue, and constantly biting at someone's ankles means they're going to look at that and go, well, either you need to go because we've hit hard times, or if we want to continue to grow, and this this amount we have to spend for you and the other people on this list is also going to have to grow. Well, we need to do something about that. So,
exactly. Yeah, I agree. So it's an interesting time coming up, and like I say, it's why when we want to invest into something that's a proper business. It's a B2B business, and then we're digitizing it rather than purely just SaaS enterprise solutions.
That's a really interesting scenario that we find ourselves in, and an interesting approach that you've got, and one that I think is a testament to why you've been around for so long. So what's looking ahead then? I know you're obviously working on a few projects now that you can't talk about, but do you have any other plans to add any additional lines of services into the business? Do you want to just continue sort of doubling down on what it is you're doing? You mentioned that you're entering into another stage for building up your fund again. So is that going to be a different funding goal? What's kind of the future holding there?
So our current fund gives us the ability to do another 3 investments this year.
Right.
This year? That means, well, I mean, if it bleeds into January, fine, but we should have another 3, hopefully this year. So we're about to do our 7th this year. And then we'll have another 3. And then we're raising money to start deploying again from February the 1st. And that will be very similar to what we're doing now. Also with the capacity to follow on into some of the ones that we've done this year. In terms of services, to be honest with you, I kind of flip between it. I would love to offer more support to our founders on, and we are doing it a bit, but on a bigger scale, growth, marketing, that side of things.
Right.
We've struggled to find great partners for it, to be honest. It's really hard. Okay. We'll chat.
Yeah.
So
sort of like a bit more of that tutelage and sort of more of a treatment of almost that accelerator / incubator style of things.
Yeah, we have to be, we have to be really careful that you don't end up, as a venture studio or a venture builder, whatever people are calling it, that you don't just do everything, right?
Yeah.
Because
that's a temptation, right?
It's a temptation, and ultimately we're investing into really competent, smart founders who are coming to us because we're really good at building tech and product. So we are tempted to do more on other parts of the business, help them with their business model, help them with their financial model, and we do bits and pieces of that, but we kind of do it a bit informally at the moment because we've got an amazing VC team, we've got an amazing CFO, so naturally we can kind of help with that kind of stuff, but that team is only so big. So at the moment, focus is on product and tech, and just finding more great businesses, and we support them strategically in terms of business and business model and go to market proposition. But and yeah, that's another thing, right? Another thing, go to market proposition. We do it to a degree with our product teams, but probably only to a degree. We probably could do that in even greater detail. But yeah, again, you kind of, what do we want to be known for? We want to be known for building great products and building great tech.
And I suppose you also don't want to cross a line as well of from CTO or CPO, essentially like fractional CTO, CPO as a service, into someone. So the line which is between you and say a CRO or CGO or COO, right? You don't necessarily want to cross that line too much because presumably they may already have that within their team, or they at least should.
Something we're getting it. We have put a bit more focus into is growth tactics within the product team recently, but very much kind of within the product team, rather than on the CMO side. So we will always need we don't want to be doing execution on PPC or execution on PR campaigns or execution and stuff for them. We can support, but yeah, it's a fine line.
Yeah, interesting. And the fund itself, how does that work? So presumably you have partners that you are engaged with on that that are contributing to that fund. Or is it an open fund? Is it something that you or maybe you plan to open up to other want to be investors in the future?
I don't know how much you know about structuring a fund, but it is bloody difficult. Unnecessarily difficult, very frustrating, because if you're in America, you can get something set up so much easier. Although someone told me actually they're changing that. I don't know whether there's been some bad scenarios or bad situations happen, but my understanding is, in America, you can very quickly raise a few million quid and then, very easily set up a discretionary fund, so you can make discretionary decisions on behalf of your investors.
It depends on the state, from what I understand.
Probably depends on the state.
But generally, I think it is a little easier.
Way harder over here. So we actually, it was a really, I always thought that when we started looking at this about 18 months ago, I thought raising the money was going to be the difficult bit. I went into it naively, and actually we were able to raise the money very quickly we had some existing investors into Founder and Lightning, into our main opco, not as a fund, and also a network that we built up. And actually we were able to raise, it's just we called it a micro fund to get going, but we were able to raise that very quickly. What we couldn't find was a structure to take everybody's money. So actually the way we had to structure it in the end, we're not a fund. We're not making discretionary decisions on behalf of our investors because we're not compliantly allowed to. We've got 2 investors that we push deals to, and if they want to invest, they do, and if they don't, they don't. That's how we had to do it. And then we've got a bunch of our other investors that will come in on a deal by deal basis, yet again, if they want to. So we're replicating as much as we can, whilst making sure it's compliant, and we're making sure that we do it, like I say, in this compliant way. Not ideal. It's slower than it should be. However, for the next one that we're raising, we're talking to 2 or 3 partners about structuring it as a proper fund, and we'll be raising more money. We don't yet know exactly how much it will be, but it will be a large enough amount so that we can raise it as a proper discretionary fund, and then we won't have those admin issues.
And presumably cover the fees associated with that too. Yeah, there's a lot of in the last year or two, there's definitely been a growth in a lot of more accessible structures to help with developing funds. I'm not sure.
Yeah, you've got Odin, you've got Valbon, you've got
right. Yeah,
you've got.
Are those the kind of things you're looking at, or something a bit more sort of, a bit more hands-on, a bit more bespoke?
Looking at them, looking at some others, some that are a bit more bespoke. Yeah, so we're hoping to make a decision. Actually, I think it's either probably end of this week or next week. Talking to about three or four different people.
And then I suppose that kind of answers my other question there earlier, which was, are you looking to maybe open it up? Which is it's really going to depend on how you manage to build this structure, right? If you go onto something like Odin, maybe that's possible that you could start opening the doors.
We're definitely opening up. I mean, so when we first raised a year ago, I had a lot of investors who said, "Oh yeah, perfect. I'm in for 50 to 100k or whatever." We couldn't take their money. Couldn't actually take their money. It was really frustrating because we couldn't create the structure that was compliant to do it. So we will be able to take those.
I mean, you could just handle cash. I mean, that might make it a little bit easier, wouldn't it? Just briefcases of cash.
Yeah, I don't think the FCA would like that.
They don't have to know it's all in cash. They'd never know.
But so I mean, the short answer is yes. We're opening it up. I would imagine that when we come to close, we'll probably have tens, if not tens of investors. Maybe maybe I don't know, somewhere between 20 and 60 investors, I imagine.
So what specifically were the challenges there when you first did the fund? Because I think that's quite interesting for anyone listening who might be sort of interested in going a similar route. I mean, there could be some interesting learnings there. So what were the challenges specifically that you found?
So if you use something like Odin, it's still not a discretionary fund, so you still have to push it out to your investors, and they can obviously say yes or no to the deal. So you have to, it's very difficult to go out to market and say we've raised X amount of millions if you haven't.
So for those who do, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, because my knowledge on this isn't the best, but discretionary fund is essentially where you have a pool of money that you can invest on behalf of the investors without having to consult them.
Correct.
They've essentially given you that money to say, invest it however you see fit.
Yeah, invest it however you see fit.
Yeah.
Within the thesis that you've obviously laid out.
Right. Yeah.
So what I spoke about before, B2B, offline to online, scrappy MVP, no code that we digitize, it would all be very much, the right valuations, right metrics, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So that's that. So there's that. If you use one of those platforms, although yet again, some of these platforms are creating now the ability to have a discretionary fund, so it's getting better. Second problem is obviously expense. So you are looking at minimum of 20k plus. Either some of the different models that people have is either it's a small upfront fee and then they take a cut of the carry and the management fee, or a much larger yearly fee with no cut of the carry. So you're either looking at somewhere between 75 to 100 grand sometimes yearly with no cut of the carry or management fee, or you're looking at somewhere 20 to 30k setup fee with a cut of the carry and a cut of the management fee. So it's just not easy. And then the third thing is probably time choosing the right partner. Have to have the right credibility, and you have to have the right partnership with them, because even some of those different options they're actually taking, some of these guys, they're taking the risk. So you have to be selected with them way more than you're probably selecting them, because you need to show competence, you need to show some kind of track record, you need to show that you can do this, because if you muck this up, they're going to get sued. So I think we obviously have a track record because of our previous business model, because for 7 years we were building companies that some of which are now doing really, really well. So we had a track record of that, which has allowed us to probably do this a little bit faster than what other people would be able to do. So it looks like we've done quite a lot in the last year, but actually that's the 7 years before that of proving our competence and our ability to do this. So I would actually say if someone was looking at doing this, just go and set up a syndicate. Go and set up a syndicate, use Odin, use Valbon, whatever platform you want to use, and you can charge a management fee per deal. You can, I believe, still charge a carry from your investors on there. So I think that's probably the best way of just getting going, rather than trying to structure it as a proper fund if you don't have the track record yet. If you're looking to make, say you're looking to make your own angel investments, but you kind of want to be able to do bigger check sizes, go out and build a 20, 30, 40 angel syndicate and do it on a deal by deal basis instead. It's way easier to get going. You can prove track record.
Yeah, that's good advice. So let's shift gears a bit. I want to know a bit more about you and your role as founder and CEO. So obviously, I'd imagine that it's changed significantly over the years, as it usually does. So and you talked a bit about your team and kind of the different focuses your team has on different when working with new businesses and so on. So how do you fit into all of this? Are you more the sort of conductor role? Are you very sort of much on the front lines? Are you speaking with the founders? Are you working with them? How do you operate on a day-to-day sort of basis these days?
So I would say the conductor is a good analogy.
Right.
I would say 50% plus of my time is spent on forward-facing activities. So brand, network, relationships, and that broadly filters down to finding good opportunities to either invest into or work with, or investors or partners to invest, to work with us. That's probably 50% plus of my role. And then we have a fantastic leadership team that do the nitty gritty day to day. And then obviously my job is to work closely with them, but also not get in their way. Right. To try.
So would you say you're like the face of the brand in many ways, in that sense?
Yeah, and to keep the rhythm moving of the company in the best way I can, yet again without getting in the way unnecessarily. So it's difficult. It's really hard. We're over 100 people. I think about 130 something. So it's a difficult balance, because you need to know when to try and dig into stuff, when not to, and that changes over time. So 5 years ago, I was doing the sales. I was, very much more involved on each project that we worked on. But I much prefer my role now compared to then. Right. And there's way better people at doing that stuff that I was doing back then that now work with us than what I was at doing it back then. So that's such a cliche, right? But hiring people that are better than you is a massive cliche, but it's one of those cliches that's very much true. Otherwise, you're just going to stay a tiny company. It's a cliche for a reason. Exactly. Otherwise, you're just going to stay a tiny company, and then your job as the founder is to try and keep the vision in check and try and make sure that it's not as easy. It's not as simple as just letting people get on with it. And I've made that mistake in the past. I brought people in who were maybe great people, but maybe I didn't set the direction as clearly as I should have a few years ago. And I think I've got the balance much better now with great people, but also, being clearer on the direction that I want the company to go in, because you can't lose that. And I think that's maybe some bad advice that founders get sometimes, is hire really smart people, just let them get on with it. I think there's a bit missing there. Hire really smart people and make sure you're aligned on where you're trying to get to and what their roles and accountability is. That's the second very important piece of that.
Yeah, I agree, and it kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier about a founder's job, essentially, to be the sort of torch with the vision, right? The vision following.
You got to have the vision. You got to have the energy to keep going. You've got to be a great recruiter. You've got to be the gatekeeper of the culture, and ultimately, if you can see the culture in the company isn't what it should be, then you've got to do something about it. I think you've got to be the one that's prepared to make the really tough calls and tough decisions. So yeah, you can have a fantastic team, but it's still going to come to you if this isn't working. What should we do about it? And you're the one that says we need to drastically change that, or that person's not working out, or that customer or that client or whatever, we shouldn't be working with that person or whatever. I think you've got to be the one that is prepared to make those really tough decisions and set the example. Just set the example for your team as much as possible, and then caveat all of that with where it's right, get out of the way, and trust them to do a great job. Because if you don't, then you're just never going to scale. You're never going to get bigger.
It's a balancing act, isn't it? So what's been the most surprising things that you've encountered over the years scaling from, I presume it was just yourself originally, or did you have co-founder or co-founders when you started the business?
Just me, and then the co-founders came in literally within a few months.
Right. What's the biggest surprise been across that journey? Or surprises, maybe there's more.
I don't know. Maybe not surprises, just maybe observations.
Right.
Observations. It took way longer to find good salespeople than I ever imagined.
Right.
Which meant until about 2 years ago, pretty much I was the one, and my co-founder was doing some of it as well. And we found a excellent, amazing person about 2 years ago. She's still with us. So yeah, got sold to by the wrong salespeople probably in the past some time. Had some successes as well. But yeah, I think that was difficult. I think that balance between hiring really senior people, but also people that are willing to get their hands dirty, is a big learning. I think we've got a really good balance now of really experienced people, but don't necessarily need an enormous team, to support them. They're at that point where they're still willing to really do a lot of the work themselves, and I think that's always a big learning for a founder. You kind of think as a founder that you need this person with 30 years experience or whatever. They could be an amazing advisor, or even an amazing consultancy or fractional or whatever, but I would question often whether they are the right full-time.
Yeah.
That was definitely an observation or a surprise. Another surprise is just how difficult it's going to be. You just when you think you've got it nailed with the right team or the right funding or the right business model, something is just going to come and punch you around the face that you didn't expect. So just never, ever, ever get too comfortable. You just have to be, and I know that there's a lot, on social media about this at the moment, this hustle culture, and that it's not healthy to promote it. But if you're a founder and you think you're not going to have to work outrageously hard and be thinking about your business 24/7, 7 days a week, then just don't do it. Because I've not met a single successful person who's exited their business that worked 4 days a week and wasn't outrageously stressed out for 70-80% of the time. So it's not popular to promote it, but I think it's just a fact that you can either do it or you can't, So
I think with this whole topic, the problem with it is people in general like extremes, right? So it's like, the truth is the truth is usually a nuance. It's not, it's in the gray area. And with something like that, what people forget to mention is that, yes, like you said, it's highly stressful. You're gonna have to work, ungodly hours sometimes. It's not suggesting that you have no life, that you can't, be part of your family, that you can't, it's not suggesting that. It's like, you don't need to take it to, an extreme. It's like you can be highly stressed in your work, but you can leave that stress at your laptop, and you can go off and do things with your family to de-stress you and enjoy your time. You can take time off whenever you like. That's one of the benefits of it, but don't overtake it, otherwise your business will suffer. Like it's not as simple as, but it's just easier to put in a Twitter post or in a LinkedIn post, like just the one statement, like hustle hard, I agree. You shouldn't hustle.
It's extremes on both sides, but I really think I was always one of these people that was like, everyone should start a business, everyone should be a founder. I don't think it is for everybody.
Absolutely not for everybody. Absolutely,
I really don't think it is. It's really, 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 really hard. I would be a terrible employee. I would not be a good employee. But you know, I enjoy doing this. I enjoy doing this. This is what I enjoy, but it's not for everybody. So yeah, I think an observation is just how hard it's going to be, and how hard it is to find the right people, set the right culture, set the right vision, raise enough money, keep enough revenue coming in, keep that balancing act going of that many people. But the rewards are enormous, you know, obviously financially if you get it right, but autonomy, building something from scratch, you know, getting a bunch of great people together and going on a journey with them, you know, that is incredible. But you just,
and especially with what you're doing, because you're not only building your own businesses, but you're helping others build theirs. So it's like you're you know, double the layer of satisfaction of those accomplishments in a sense, because you're continuously replicating those set of accomplishments, and that's hugely rewarding. And I'm in a similar but not directly the same sort of position as you, and I can totally see the reward that you gain from that. There's something hugely satisfying about seeing someone execute their vision and knowing that you participated in that. To some degree, and helped achieve that.
On a good day, that's double the rewards. On a bad day, it's double the stress.
Right.
Because you've got your own business. You've got your own business that you're trying to make work, and then you naturally, we vicariously live through these founders that we work with, right? You know, we feel every up and down. Oh, this picture's gone badly. We've closed this client. Great, we've lost this client, bad. You know, we're running out of funding, you know, so we deal with all of that, but we do it because we love it, and we like that feeling of building stuff from scratch, and as you say, being on that journey. But you know, you got to have pretty high stress tolerance to deal with that and just enjoy it.
Yeah, well, it's a theme that keeps coming up in these episodes, is, you know, the topic of resilience being being such an enormously important attribute for founders, and I think it's just it goes back to that, and it always seems to resilience and that willingness to continually grow. Because the one thing I've observed being a founder slash entrepreneur over the years, and having worked with others as well, is that just as when you feel like, okay, I feel like I've got pretty much the skill set down needed to do this job now, then something comes along and you're like, oh no, no, I really don't. Like, I have to learn a whole other thing now. You know? And so it keeps you on your toes, definitely, but you've got to roll with the punches, and it's no use just saying I will hire someone to fill that role. Like, no, you need to understand it. You need to understand.
You have to understand. You have to understand. You know, I'm a very, very. I'll never be able to code. I'll never. You know, very lucky to have an amazing co-founder, CTO, who is the technical wizard that looks after our entire tech team. But I understand what they're doing at a top level because I've had to learn it. You know, I've had to learn.
You need to have a bullshit detector, like at the end of the day, on everything, and so you need to understand enough of everything to know when you're being bullshitted. It's basically similar to that sales thing you mentioned earlier. It's like that, you know, you're definitely not the first person that said to me about feeling like they encountered some sort of snake oil salesman early on in their business life cycle. I've got a bit of a theory about that, actually. I feel like there might actually be sort of a two-way explanation for that, but there are definitely a lot of bullshit artists out there as well. I hope I'm not in that camp. More on the other. My theory actually on that goes that I feel like it's usually very early on in the business. You usually hear the story of it happening usually around a time when a business is kind of trying to understand their true value propositions, that actually really fully understanding what their ideal customer profile is, you know, getting validation and, you know, product market fit. It's in a moment of unknown, and salespeople aren't built to do that. They aren't built, you know, the role of a salesperson is to come into a predefined organization and sell something that is predefined. Generally speaking, there are very, very few entrepreneurial salespeople out there that can take an unfinished product, an unfinished service, an unfinished value proposition, et cetera, and help you get it to market. There's very, very few out there.
That's why we target founders that we believe have got the ability to sell, because they are if the founder can't sell at the start, no one else is going to be able to, right? You know, ultimately, we play a pretty big role in helping our founders get to where they need to get to, but they're the heroes. We're there just to support them. You know, that's our job. We don't want to be the heroes. We want to be their guides to help them get there.
Exactly.
But but yeah, they need to be able to sell, and I think you're right. I think maybe if either they don't enjoy selling or the sales aren't going quite as they expect, you have this this angel comes into an interview with this black book. Oh yeah, it's going to be absolutely fine, and that it always takes 3 to 6 months to see whether it's going to work or not, and it doesn't. And as you say, it's because there isn't a great process, there isn't a clear value proposition. They haven't got product market fit yet.
Yeah. And just likely what's happening over that. Sorry, just really quickly, likely what's happening over that 3 to 6 month period as well is at the same time as them trying to sell what is kind of being figured out, there are pivots happening. And you're saying, okay, actually now we've changed, we're going to be doing this, we're going to be doing that. And they're like, but so it is, I think it is on both sides fault, to put the, people into that position. It happens time and time again. I've been in that position as a salesperson in my, early stages of my career, back when I did that sort of stuff. And it's not fun because it's like, that it's just making you look bad when but when it's kind of out of your control. So like you said, I'm a huge proponent for founder-led sales in early stages of companies for that exact reason. Otherwise you are just pissing away a year's salary on someone for no reason, when something that you should be doing yourself. And then plus you get to a stage where you have a great bullshit detector for it later on, not to mention a much clearer understanding of what your commercial strategy should be.
You need to talk in direct to your customers. You need to hear from them
100%
why they're not using it, or if they're using it in a certain way, or all this kind of stuff. It's vital.
Get your churns out the way.
Go back to what you said before about resilience and grit. I think you said resilience. We use the word grit quite a lot,
right?
And I think it's so much of the success. It's just if I look at our portfolio companies, the ones that we worked with still work with most of them now 5, 6, 7 years ago, the ones that are now at Series A, and doing, some of them pushing 3 million ARR, really doing, really good revenue, and got product market fit, got where they've got to. Obviously we played a part, but you look back at that and the founder and their ability to keep going and manage to raise a bit of money when it looked like they were going to run out, make the really tough calls to have to let people go if that's what they had to do, go and win that 1 or 2 clients that just manages to get them through. That it really is that grit and resilience that you just need to be able to keep going longer than other people. People give up far too quickly, and I know it's a balance because if you're barking up the wrong tree, then you should quit. And I don't know, it's very hard to know what that right balance is. But I look back at our portfolio companies and I think that is the number one trait. It's grit, determination, keep going, but in a way where you are learning as you go. Be humble enough to know that you don't know everything, and you'll just be a constant learner. You mix that with some domain expertise and grit and determination, you've got a really good chance of getting somewhere.
100%. Yeah. Who wants a unicorn when you can have a cockroach, right? Those fuckers never die. Right. That's what you want.
The new one is tortoise. Slow and steady wins the race.
Oh, okay. Right. Okay. Yeah. Tortoise. I've heard donkey as well recently, and then where was it? I went to an event recently, and what was it she was on about? She was on about some really weird animal.
Animal.
It seems to be. Yeah. It seems to be a new trend now to try and come up with the unicorn alternative. Yeah. The biggest reason I think being that we're talking about animals that actually exist, which is probably says a lot.
Good point. What do you mean? What, unicorns don't exist?
Sorry to break it to you, but no, I'm afraid not. No, but at least they're not they're not as prolific as we'd hoped anyway.
No.
But I think it's a really interesting conversation. And like I said, it always kind of comes back to this at some point. And perhaps we're going to sound like broken records a bit for those who listen to all of these, which I doubt there's many people out there that listen to every single one of these episodes. but I hope there would be. The other key sort of determining factor I've noticed for a certain level of success with founders is that self-awareness bit too, right? Which is hugely important, and that kind of goes to your point about knowing where that line is with potentially barking up the wrong tree. That is a really difficult thing. Like I said, I spoke to a lot of people who really shouldn't be, pursuing a certain thing. And that's a very hard thing to tell people. But I think the reason why it's important when clearly there is no viable business in someone's idea, to say this isn't a viable business, you shouldn't pursue it, is I personally see that as a moral responsibility, right? If I'm talking to someone who's potentially going to be risking their entire livelihoods, maybe even that of their family, by pursuing something that is not viable because I have insight that they don't. Like, it's a moral obligation of mine to tell them that if you do this, you will be fucking homeless. Like, don't do this. Like, please.
It's like a civic duty, right?
Right. Yeah, to a degree, I think it is. And also because that they probably don't get that from other people because of, generally people are too kind to maybe rip off the band-aid.
I think the point is it's not maybe about saying that your idea is crap. It's about saying, okay, can you go and get me 20 people that have said that if you build it, they'll buy it? Or, can you show me the validation from, if you built a quick prototype and if you got them to run through it? Or can you show me the research where clearly this need is there? So I think you're much kinder than I am. I just tell them it's crap. Well, you can just, because the thing is that, these people, the people that have got this terrible idea, there might be a good founder, right? So right. You don't want to put them off. No, I would say that it's not the. It could be even the space might even be right, but it's just the actual solution that you've come up with is completely wrong. And if you're a founder, yet again, this is a massive cliche, but you have to fall in. And yet again, some people massively disagree with this, but I think it's true. You've got to fall in love with the problem. You can fall in love with it in a business sense and be like, I'm not, it's not like my biggest life passion, but fall in love in a business sense. I think there's a business idea here with the problem, not with the solution. And if you change that mindset as a founder to, this is the problem that I'm solving for my customers or my users, rather than this is the solution I'm building for those customers, and I don't care whether that problem exists or not. You can just slightly pivot that thinking, then you're way more likely as a founder to fall less in love with the solution, and you will find, because it probably isn't that first solution that you think of, you'll find something to build. So I just try to encourage founders to make sure that they've done the proper research on the problem validation first, rather than just jumping to the solution. That's where it almost always goes wrong. And then the founder's got in their head what it's going to look like. It's going to be this app. It needs to do that. It's going to be an app. Yeah. It needs to have all these features, and it's going to have a wearable, and it's going to be this, and it's going to be that. It's like, well, unless you've been doing this for 10, 20 years, you're almost definitely wrong. And I agree with you. It's a moral duty, civic duty, whatever you want to call it, just to make sure that they rethink that. Because that's ultimately why 90% of startups fail, right? Is because the thing that they think at the start ends up not being true.
And also I'd add as well that this is I think really important for motivation to go through that process too, because of actually one of the biggest blockers for a lot of people even starting their own business or wanting to delve into entrepreneurialism as a whole is not knowing where to start, or like you said, that sort of that concern, that worry for potentially failing. So because of that, they just don't want to put that one step forward. But actually, if you know that one step that you've got to put forward, that one step you've got to put forward is just speak to people about your idea, and then go and speak to more people about your idea, and increase the degrees of separation between you and them each time you do it, so that they are as unbiased as you can possibly get. Like, I think that's a pretty straightforward step, right? Like that's a pretty easy one to get into, other than incorporating a company, building a website, registering a domain, like spending
10 grand on branding before you've actually done anything else. I mean, honestly, the amount of times I've had founders come to us and you'd be like, right, this is what you're doing. Well, I've already spent 10 grand on branding. Well, why have you done that?
Yeah. Nothing to brand.
Yeah, you've got nothing to brand. I totally agree. It's a fantastic book. I can't remember the name of the author, called Backable. And he says in his book that you, before you go out to market, start raising money to get someone to back you, you need to, as the founder, absolutely 100% believe in your idea, and go and talk to some people and pitch the idea, and then get the reactions, and then see if you still really, really believe in it. Because If you don't, you're not going to be able to raise money. You're not going to authentically be able to go out there and raise money, because the back of your head, you're going to have this lingering doubt. Is this actually a good idea or not? So yeah, you know, must go and do the research. And if you do then pull the trigger, do it in the cheapest possible, fastest way, and just get something to market.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. And how do you advise people go about that? Because like we just said, it's the simplest, most practical step. I just gave the example of like, just go and speak to people. But what would you say is like a good way of being able to do that this day and age, if especially if it's quite a unique sort of set of individuals?
Yeah, I mean,
right, in it.
I think it depends obviously on your situation, right? Are you relatively high up in an organization, and if you spotted a problem in that specific industry, then can you do something within your work? Can you try and get some budget and build it as an internal product? At least to start with. But yeah, I think talking to people, building a prototype, or if you have got that kind of money where you can put $5,000 into something, then as long as you've done the right validation still, then that's a good way of getting going. But just trying to do something as cheap and as quick as possible. And then caveat there, if you can do something offline, why not do something that's service led to start with? Because then you're really proving it. I mean, I don't think there's ever been a better time to start something. I just don't know whether it's an amazing time to scale something.
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting point. Yeah, you can maintain a decent level of income as a business owner these days, but actually bringing it to the next level and scaling it to a decent sized team and so on is harder. There's that chasm has got a lot wider in the last few years for sure. Yeah,
Agreed.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to ask you about talent briefly. You spoke about the scaling process and how you've hired people with a certain skill set, and you're saying about hiring people better than you. That's a bit of a cliche, but it's a very true one. What would you say was sort of some of the principles or processes you put in place to achieve that? Because it's quite a difficult. It can quite often be a blind spot, right? It's a difficult thing to know where your skill set, what the limits of your current skill set or knowledge are, and what other people can bring to the table. So it's how did you, especially in the early stages of scaling, how did you address that? Because that's a difficult one, isn't it?
So I've made tons of mistakes in the past. I think I've got it right now. Made tons of mistakes in the early and mid times. So yeah, a few things. You have to be absolutely crystal clear, honest with yourself and where your gaps are. And if you haven't got self-awareness, then you're going to really, really struggle. I think that is so important. I know what I think I'm good at. Well, I'm pretty sure I know what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. And then you need to hire people around that and, prioritize those hires in the right order. Don't just get what you think or what you're told you need. Get what you actually need for you. Your business way better than an advisor coming in or whatever. Second thing, don't always have to be full-time. So if you do want that senior marketing person, that's what you think you need. Just as an example, I do actually think these fractional roles are pretty good. I do actually think that it can work, but as long as you've got.
Yeah, I do a couple of fractional executive contracts every year, and they prove to be highly valuable for the business, the startup.
I really think in those sort of earlier years when you haven't got the budgets to hire someone, and yet again, do you really need that super senior person? Just make sure. I think whoever you get as an advisor or fractional, they have to do the work. I just don't know whether there's any point in them coming in and just telling you what you should do. I mean, you can read about that in a book or watch something on YouTube, right? You need doers. Another massive cliche, but has 100% been true to me. And like I said, I think I've really got this right recently. We've got this right recently. Hire for culture over skill set. And yet again, it's a cliche. I get it, and it's a balance. There's no point having an amazing culture fit and someone that just fundamentally cannot do the job. But if you can err on the side of culture, the rest of it can be learned. And I think trying to find those people. I mean, your specific question was about scaling, right? So I think trying to find those people that maybe, you know, are at director level that want to become the C-suite, you know, I think that's a really good, sort of use case or you know, fit, I think.
Like career ambition,
you know, that's an opportunity that you're going to give them that maybe someone else won't. It means you can give them great autonomy. It means that they really want to prove it to themselves and to you and for their career, especially if you cut them in on some equity and, you know, make sure that they benefit from the future of the company. You know, they're ready to take that next step. You know, that's really hard. You've got to find the right people that are ready and that they're not going to just sink, and you might not always get that right. But I would personally, from knowing all I know from the last 8 years, I would do that rather than go bring someone full-time in who's got that 10, 15, 20 years experience. I'd have that person as an advisor or as a fractional person. And then when the time was right, I would hire those people that are just at that point where they're about to go to the C-suite.
Well, they're hungry, aren't they? And that helps.
Hungry.
When it comes to what you mentioned there about culture, so there seems to be an interesting tipping point when you start to get to a certain size of an organization where really the culture starts to take on a life of its own to a point, right? But like you said, yes, you are the one setting the tone for that, you know, quite often, and you're almost a custodian of the culture. But you and the executive team at a certain point can only do, you know, so much. It breathes its own life into it. You know, your team are hiring additional team members. It's a self-perpetuating machine at some point. Do you ever get concerned with some of the rhetoric that's kind of out there at the moment, that's quite divisive? You know, let's be honest, like there's a lot of divisive rhetoric out there, and especially as it relates to the workplaces. Given the sort of the scale of where you are now, and not having that direct level of oversight on culture, like what do you maybe put in place to mitigate that? Like,
what's the divisive stuff? What's the divisive stuff you're talking about, like remote working and?
Well, no, I'm talking more sort of the the identity politics discussions, the discussions around and that too. You know, everything's very divisive. Every subject divides people now, right? It's never been more a divisive time. It feels like, I don't know if maybe that's just nostalgia kicking in, but it seems like everything there's a debate to be had about it, and the workplace has become that very delicate place for a lot of people now. Because they feel like they can't have open conversations about, you know, certain things and their opinions and the way they feel. So how do you sort of manage that in such a sort of a team now that's got to that scale where these things can be quite explosive and cause a nightmare of sort of, you know, HR issues potentially? We have
our DNA written down, and every person that joins sees it in the interview process. It's part of our it's part of the, you know, like the discussion between manager and team member, you know, about how they're doing in the company. You know, a percentage of their feedback isn't just based on the quality of their work. It's based on have they adhered to our DNA. And one of those things is we're an apolitical company, right? So I just think there are certain things that, you know, maybe just aren't right to be spoken about at work, or, you know. So for us, it's about finding those people that don't want to be necessarily massively involved in those kind of conversations at work, you know, and just being very clear. I mean, we've never had a problem with that. We've never had divisive issues or issues that have got toxic or anything like that. And
that's good.
I think it doesn't mean that you can't believe in certain things as a business, but I just think our job is to ultimately build a really nice place for people to work, to progress, and culture as well. It's not just, I think often people think culture is it a happy place to work? Culture means way more than that, right? It's like, do you take risks as a company? Do you give people opportunities? Do you give them autonomy to work in the way they want to work? Do you give them chances? Is there the ability for them to, you know, get promoted at, you know, a faster rate than other companies? So I think this culture term can be a bit fluffy. and people think it's just a place where everyone's nice to each other. You know, culture is also about, do you create an environment people can challenge each other? It's 100% been more difficult for us since COVID, since things are remote. We've got people scattered everywhere. I think we do a decent job. You know, I'd like to think we do. Our retention is pretty good. So there's obviously something that we're doing, but you know, we're far from perfect, and there's so much more.
So are you guys fully remote now?
No, we're hybrid. So we have offices. We have offices in India, offices in India, but we've got them now scattered all around India. Where originally it was just in one location. We were originally just in London, and we were in most days, or maybe 3 or 4 days a week. And since COVID, where it's way less than that. So there's definitely challenges that come with that. I think we as a company need to get better at it. It's hard, you know, there's some people that I haven't seen for 2 or 3 weeks or I don't talk to. That's difficult. So it's I would say it's harder in that sort of hybrid environment, but I think we do an okay job on it. And like I say, culture isn't just about being a happy place to work. It's also about opportunities and the environment that you create.
And I think you hit the nail on the head there, because if anything, I think that's become more of a realization for a lot of companies who have embraced this hybrid or remote model and realized.
A friendly reminder to share this episode with your network, like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps the show and only takes a couple of minutes.
Saying that, you know, the culture isn't indicative of the fact that you have a physical location where everyone meets. The culture, now that people are working from home a lot of the time, is embedded in the way that they generally feel about their place of work wherever they are in the world, right? And at that time. And so it has to permeate through every interaction, through your policy, through your process, through your operations. It has to be more than surface level, just like what type of beer do you serve in the canteen, or you know, shit like that. It has to be a lot more than that, because that isn't enough these days. And that I think that's a really good thing, because it's removing that surface level bullshit associated with culture for a lot of companies and making them have to sort of look in the mirror a bit, isn't it?
I think if you're it gets really difficult from like 30, 40 staff upwards, you know. Below that, as the founder or the founding team or the first hires, you can really influence it. You know, if there's an issue, if there's someone that isn't adhering to the culture, that you can very quickly spot it and you can just deal with it. Once you get over a certain point, it's way more difficult, and it's really hard. The size of company we are is probably kind of like in the middle, right? You know, we're not big enough yet in that we can have an enormous HR team. We do have an HR team, but we're also not small enough in that it's easy to spot things. So I think all things considered, we do a decent job, but it's definitely something we're always looking to improve.
Yeah, because you're at that sort of size, you then start getting this sort of these almost subcultures, you know, in a way, don't you? Sort of create these smaller groups of individuals, which is natural human behavior. You know, in large groups, you'll get smaller groups and so on. You know, and it's difficult. You don't want to you want to monitor it, but you don't want to be the monitor or policing of people's social interactions. So it's a hard balance to strike, isn't it?
You're hiring adults, right? You know,
right?
You know.
Well, you'd hope so.
You want them, you hope so. You want them to act and think in a certain way, but yeah, within reason, basically.
Yeah. It's difficult, and then when you start mandating things or trying to police things, it just doesn't seem to help, does it? At the end of the day, like you said, you're hiring adults. You need to trust people that they're going to be getting on with each other and not be idiots to each other.
Correct.
So yeah. Well, look, as we're coming to the last portion of it already, which is zoomed by, I'm curious to know. Normally, I kind of ask about towards the end. I ask about sort of tips for other founders and this and the other, but we've already covered quite a bit of that already. So instead, I want to switch gears a little bit. Let's talk more about. I want to know more about what tips you would give specifically for founders when they are looking at product, right? Because that's your bread and butter. So let's focus on that. So specifically about your specific thesis, the types of founders you're looking for. If they're looking at going from MVP, bit of traction, that your ballpark kind of area, what are typically the kinds of things that you would want to be focusing on with them? And this could maybe act as a bit of a sort of advice to anyone listening who's maybe in that sort of stage. what should you be looking at? What are going to be the first steps to upgrading that platform into a more robust version? What are some of the things to expect from that whole scenario, perhaps?
So I think it's probably better advice maybe for the people that are maybe will listen to your show is just to go that step back.
Okay.
And just I think it's really just to reiterate what I said at the start is and fed through is that there are basically 4 or 5 reasons why your startup won't work, and to please consider them and to think about them. And that is problem you think you're solving doesn't exist. It's a vitamin, not a painkiller. You've got the wrong team, the wrong timing, or you've not got enough cash runway, to which is all linked. And I think that is the we need more startups to succeed in this country, right? We've got the highest tax burden in the history of the country. Public services are not great. NHS is really struggling. So how are we going to get out of that? We need to create more wealth, right? And it's probably not spoken about as much as it should be, because I don't know, we're British and maybe we find it a bit weird or a bit odd or whatever, but we basically need more people to get rich so that they can pay a shed load of tax to keep the society that we all want to live in going. And if you're looking at startups, we need more of those to succeed. So it is that those 4 or 5 reasons over and over and over and over. And I think we talk about the slightly later stage, it's usually the same thing, right? It's a version of that. I mean, in terms of when people come to us and they are starting to digitize things, I think as a founder, don't think that your sole digitization opportunity in your business, let's just say you're an offline business or you've got a little bit of tech in there, don't think your sole digitization opportunities are on the front end, i.e. what the customer sees, right? There is enormous opportunities to digitize the back end of a business, the operations, to build internal tools that will allow you to ultimately hire less staff, have a bigger gross margin, have more efficiency. So I think that is really big part of what we do. When we're going into these companies and we're digitizing them, yes, we're improving the front end relationship that they have with their customers, but we're also building a ton of stuff in the back end that is going to allow them to scale way faster without hiring as many people. In terms of the tech and the product side, I think going over your sense checking your value proposition and your go-to-market. So even though there's an element of product market fit when we start working with these companies, we still go through a whole discovery process and make sure that the go-to-market is right, make sure that the proposition is right, and we usually tighten it up and go through a whole process there. In terms of the tech side, that tech side's more my CTO. He'll be able to do a better answer than me.
Right, fair enough. So that's interesting. Why do you like to go over that sort of stuff again, even though that they may well have shown that?
Well, if you're gonna digitize it and you're gonna scale up, often they've got some kind of early product market fit, but they've also been through the prism of their either solo founder or a very small team. So having some fresh eyes on it could be a different vertical. It could be a tighter proposition. It could be a slightly widened proposition. There could be opportunities that they're leaving on the table. I think often we're investing into like companies that have either got a version of product market fit or just before it. So the additional value we can add is often significant with just tweaking a couple of things.
Right. And some of those businesses, it was interesting what you said there about that digitizing often takes place on the back end of business from an operational standpoint. Presumably that does mean that there's potential for future commercialization of those solutions to other enterprises. Is that something that has happened with some of the existing portfolio companies you've worked with, or is that maybe something that they would be looking at in terms of a white label solution to bring that out?
I think particularly when you invest into what we call proper businesses, what I spoke about before, you're building software that is going to make their business better. But if it's working for them in their industry, there's no reason why you can't then go and license it out. I mean, I can't go into details on this, but we're literally having a conversation right now with one of ours, literally around that. How do they scale internationally? And rather than building their business, and getting a footprint physically internationally, we're talking about just licensing the technology and almost doing like a quasi franchise.
Right.
So it's exactly that. Once you build some great tech, there are really clever ways that you can scale, maybe ways that you didn't think about when you first started the business. But if you can build a proper business these days that's got revenue, that isn't solely reliant on the tech, then it kind of goes against what you probably would think someone that runs a venture studio would say, that is building tech companies. But I think that thinking is going to serve you in really good stead at the moment, because money is just going to sort out so many problems at the moment. Because what we're seeing is it's harder now to keep raising rounds when you haven't quite hit the metrics that you said you were going to. Whereas in the past, you could probably manage to keep raising, give yourself enough oxygen to get to the right point.
Or even if you have hit the metrics you said you were going to.
It's still harder, yeah. It's still harder, but definitely if you don't hit them. So if you can turn yourself into a proper company as quickly as possible, then do it and focus on that more than anything, and then the rest of it will come.
And reading between the lines, when you say proper company, it sounds to me like what you're kind of alluding to is just profit-making company, right?
At least break even, right? At least break even with the ability to get to profit quickly. And then if you do then want to scale up, raise big VC funding or whatever, at least you're doing it from a position of strength, right? Not we've got this enormous burn that we need to support by further fundraising. So I don't know. Look, it's people will disagree with what I'm saying, but it's just I'm on board with it. I think I've been beating that drum for a while, for quite a few years actually, and it's good to hear. And I'm hearing more and more people say exactly what you're saying. I think, like you said though, there's always, and I'm sure we'll both agree on this, and many others would. There's always room for those businesses that have an extraordinarily high burn that need that. Right? Yeah, that's fine. We know that, but yeah, there needs to be more businesses that are actually profit making, ideally, and like you said, able to continually be able to contribute to the economy. And it's interesting because there's a couple of times you've mentioned that now about sort of what this country needs. Like it sounds like you're quite a patriotic person in that regard. So does that play a big part in the way that you think about your business as a whole, about wanting to contribute to the overall economy of the country? And it is. I think what do you use? We used that word civic duty before, right? I think if you consistently see startups and tech companies failing for the same reasons, and you can do something about it, and I think we do need to highlight the fact that money has got to come from somewhere to pay for all these things that we want to pay for. There isn't just this everlasting bunch of rich people that you can just keep, bleeding dry. They will either just leave the country or they'll tap out as well. We have to generate new wealth, and that only comes from starting new companies or creating more value from existing ones, i.e. digitizing them and making them into much bigger companies and selling them and paying tax on them and employing people. So I do.
Do you think that as a country that we encourage the proliferation of entrepreneurs?
I don't think we are. I mean, you go to America, and if you succeed in America, you're not derided. If you look at the press that Deliveroo got when they floated, was, I thought, a disgrace. This is an American who chose to set up his business in the UK, chose to float on the UK stock exchange, and it flopped, right? And it was almost in the press, it was almost like, oh yeah, it was always going to flop because it's a crap business model, all this kind of stuff. I mean, I've got my own views on the sort of 15-minute delivery businesses and stuff like that. But I mean, what Deliveroo have built is incredible. And we should be absolutely welcoming people like that have built an incredible business and got it to that point. But we're not, and I don't know why. I don't think it's. I've probably been a bit more negative than need to there. There definitely is an amazing ecosystem, an amazing startup ecosystem. Our invest, SCIS, EIS, the investment ecosystem is, we've just raised, I think, I think more VC funding this year has gone in than France and Germany combined. I think that's the stat. You know, so we're obviously good. I'm not saying that we're not. I just think I don't know whether the wider population are necessarily as encouraging of founders and entrepreneurs as they should be.
I'd be inclined to agree with you. I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding a lot of the time, especially within the tech sort of realm of what it means to be an entrepreneur or a founder in that space. I think everyone wants to support their neighbors who build a brick and mortar business to some degree. At least verbally. I don't think they support them with their wallets maybe as well as they should. But yeah, I agree with you. I think there's this rhetoric around, especially, you know, it always comes back to these tech billionaires, right? It's always about, you know, criticizing them. And actually, I think that's a really moronic thing to do. They could be idiots. I don't know. I've never met them. I couldn't say, right? I can only go off of what they post on Twitter or whatever. So it'd be a stupid thing for me to say that they're idiots based on that. But regardless of whether they are or not, it's not really the point. It seems like people have made their decision just simply out of jealousy more than anything else, because these people are in a position of wealth, which didn't come out of nowhere. And I think people forget that. And public perception of founders as a whole, especially in tech, is problematic. I agree. There needs to be more support of that.
I think people think all business owners are automatically rich and don't necessarily see, you know, the effort that goes in, and also how difficult it is to employ people. It's such a risk to employ people. The laws are, you know, yet again more liberal than certain other countries around Europe, but you know.
It's also just very fucking expensive to employ people. Equally, it's equally as difficult, if not more so, and expensive to fire people too. That's my point. That's my point. You know, our laws are more liberal than France, for example, but you know, it's still really hard. It's still really hard. So I just think, I think there's a lot of money that goes into grants. There's a lot of money that goes into, you know, accelerators and all this kind of stuff. So there's definitely money that goes from taxpayers into it. I don't know what the answer is. I just think something is missing. I don't quite know what it is, whether it's a bit of a national, I don't know, just a bit of a national mindset on maybe trying to promote success. And maybe there needs to be a slightly different social contract between people seeing that those successes turn into their lives being better. You know, but like I say, ultimately the tax burden is the highest it's ever been, or not ever. I think probably World War II, I'm sure, was higher, but it's certainly higher, right? So and actually the society is probably getting worse. So there's something missing there that I think we need to get better at. But ultimately, it comes down to how can we help? You know, we can't help with a lot of that stuff. You know, people way smarter and government need to do that. But what can we do? Maybe we can. Maybe that's something to explore, you know, also collectively in the startup community. What can we do to actually, because I remember speaking about this with a group of founders at an event I went to recently in Brighton, where I was talking with a group after the keynote about exactly this, because of one of the subjects come up about, well, what can individuals, the everyday people, do to support? It was specifically around startups for good, right? And something that was astonishing to me that wasn't mentioned in the keynote was the fact that they can vote with their wallet. They can vote with just signing up to be beta testers to things. Like there are a myriad of ways, and I feel like that we're not doing enough actually as a community of founders and startups to actually speak to people outside of our ideal customer profile. The focus is always, especially if we're B2B, which is like what you do and predominantly with my clients are. It's like we should be doing a bit more in an exercise of PR to actually help the wider startup community. To be like, you know, we want your input. We want to know what we can do in our local community. And this, that, and the other. I don't know. Maybe there is, but there's enough on the fucking plate to do as a founder.
Well, I think the way I look at it, what I think Founder Uniting can do is we can help more startups and more tech companies succeed, which ultimately is going to create wealth for the founder, which is going to create wealth for the country, which is going to create jobs. We can invest into a thesis that we believe is underserved by investors in the VC community, which is digitization, building sustainable companies, tens of millions of exit rather than hundreds, and not looking for moonshots. And we can also make sure that the founders we invest into are diverse, and we were maybe investing into people that aren't traditionally given an opportunity, whether that's gender or background or whatever. So those are the things I think we can control, and that's what we're doing. The byproduct of that is that hopefully that's a small part of making the country better as well.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really important thing to have as a North Star to some degree, for you and the company. So that's awesome to hear. I love that. Well, cool. Look, we're coming towards the end, so I just want to take these last couple of minutes to thank you for jumping on. I really appreciate it. You've caught me, like I said, in a weird week. I'm technically off this week. I'm doing something. I posted about this recently, so I'm currently in strategic leave at the moment, which is something I posted and explained about recently.
I saw it, yeah.
Right, yeah. So it's an odd time. So my brain is kind of all over the place at the moment, ripping apart everything I'm doing and all the ventures I'm involved with. So if I've seemed a bit spaced out during this conversation, I promise it's not you, it's me.
I didn't get that impression at all, don't worry.
Oh, good. Oh, that's good. But, okay. Or you might that's just how I am. I don't know. No, but I have felt like it sort of in a bit of a dreamlike state this week, because I kind of get into that trance-like state, looking at everything from a very different perspective. But no, look, man. So I really appreciate you coming on, and we'll definitely have to do round 2, because if I feel like we were just getting into scratching the surface of some of that stuff there, we were just touching on in terms of like in terms of the last couple of topics. But in the meantime, we'll keep in touch, I'm sure. And
thanks, Greg.
Yeah, and like I said, I think it won't be very long until I come across a couple of people that I should be making introductions to you
fantastic
soon, hopefully. Yeah,
sounds great. Thanks, Greg. Have a great day.
You too. Have a great day and the rest of the week. We'll speak soon. Cheers. Take care. Bye.
Thank you for listening and/or watching. Please like and subscribe and join in the conversation in the comments below.